Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today we're going to be talking to you about Elizabeth of the End. Possibly our last Liz face added to the game? Eliza here is going to be our welfare for the current Halloween event on JP, and she has come to us a little bit late in the event, as we kind of knew about her from before this point, as she was revealed during the live stream, but realistically speaking, we hadn't gotten a hand on her or her kit here until the end. And it has been a very interesting kit. I think this is going to be a unit that a lot of you guys are going to want to make sure you get your hands on, make sure you max out, simply for the kit, if nothing else. And what I mean by that, we'll talk about here in a second. But talking about Liz as a welfare is very interesting in the fact that she is an offensive Avenger here, but she has a very supportive kit. So let's go ahead, let's jump in, and I'll explain to you guys why I think she's a unit that everybody should be paying attention to. So to start off with, looking at her, again, she is an AoE Buster Avenger. But on top of that, we can take a look at her raw stats. She is going to have about 9.8k attack. This is actually pretty good for a 4-star. But remember, Avengers are usually on the high end of attack scaling. So I'm actually maybe a little bit surprised that she's not one of our like 10k units that are out there. We do have a couple of 4-stars that are in the 10k range. It's always rare to see them. But again, she's not going to be one of them, but she is pretty darn close. So again, her attack power is going to be pretty solid, even when she doesn't have her buffs online. Her HP is only going to be 11k. That might be a concern, but not really, given the way that her kit works. I'm going to say they could have set this significantly lower and it still wouldn't have been a big issue due to how it actually all unfolds. She is star attribute. She has 30 star absorption and 5.9% star generation. So again, due to her being an Avenger, don't expect a whole lot in the way of stars unless you just kind of flood the party with it. Her NP charge attack rate here is 0.56. This is maybe a little bit concerning considering she is a triple buster unit. Usually when we see triple buster units, we actually see them have a much higher NP charge rate. So this is maybe a concern that if you get outside of the realm of her skills, that she's not going to be the best unit for actually getting back to full with due to the nature of her deck. She's got a 5% NP charge defense, which is definitely nice. She's got 5% death rate, which is actually somewhat low. And she has a chaotic and evil alignment, so she'll definitely have synergy with anybody that also handles buffs for that. She's female gendered, and looking at her traits here, she's got the animal characteristic servant, demonic beast servant, dragon, Elizabeth, humanoid, non-humanoid servant, obstacle maker, servant, and weak to intimate elish traits. Again, the deck is triple buster, single arts, single quick, and we do at least have a 4-hit arts card, so that will help out some on the NP gain rate. But again, you only have the 1 card, so it's not a big deal there. The quick card, though, is 6 hits, which is very solid there, so that will help out a little bit on the kind of deficient star generation side of things. But again, I don't think you're really going to care too much about that, given what all she has later on. Taking a look at her skills here, we actually start out with her own self-charge skill. So again, she's an AoE Buster Avenger, and she's going to have a 30% charge skill. You're going to want to lower the skill for that reason alone. It is on a 6-turn cooldown. This is going to be how you're going to be able to 3-turn with Elizabeth here when you're starting out from a 50% standpoint. You might be thinking, if you already know the kit a little bit, like, what do you mean 3-turn? We'll get into that here in a minute. So she can also charge the party's gauge every turn for 3 turns by up to 10% each. So this would also impact Eliza, but again, with charge per turn being as wonky as it is, not really a whole lot of like capability there necessarily for her, unless you get into a challenge scenario where you're maybe going beyond the conventional 3-turn limit. But still, having the ability to at least give the rest of the party some charge definitely helps. You also grant the party critical star regeneration buff for 3 turns, which is just going to be, again, 10 stars per turn on each unit there. Definitely a strong effect. So this is where a lot of people are beginning to come in and say like, hey, maybe this is like a pseudo Merlin type of unit. Because again, this is a welfare. This is somebody that everybody can get as long as they had access to and completed the event. So it makes her a very, very strong option and very solid. Taking a look at the second skill here, she increases the party's attack for 3 turns. It's a base of 20%, very similar again to Merlin. And she's also going to increase the party's critical damage for 3 turns by 20%. However, if you are on the Halloween battlefield, you will gain an additional 30% crit damage for 3 turns to the entire party. So this could be, it's a 20% crit up for most of the time. But if you're pairing her alongside Caster Liz with her NP, that basically can give you the Halloween battlefield buff, this is really nice. Because this is going to allow, if the Halloween battlefield's on, her to now be a 50% crit damage up for the party right here on this skill. On top of that, she will just flat out gain critical stars whenever she uses the skill up to 30. So she has a star bomb baked into her kit. Again, this skill also on a 6-turn cooldown should you wish to 3-turn with her. Taking a look at her third skill, this is where things get interesting and honestly complex. Kind of been par for the course at this point for some of our Lizzes, but it is what it is. So from here, you can increase one ally's buster performance for 3 turns by up to 50%. So she has just a nice 50% 3-turn buster steroid. It will further increase their critical damage for 3 turns by 50%. So kind of base like 20% for the whole party, 70% for 1 unit, and then again, potentially even more if you had the Halloween battlefield in play. Also increasing their critical star absorption for 3 turns by up to 5,000%, which is excellent. This would be enough of a percentile that it would work even on herself and any other low star absorption class or unit out there. So again, 5,000%, excellent. But from here, we get some demerits. So it has a 500% chance to reduce herself to 1 HP when you use this skill. Definitely not ideal. Or is it? You see, from here, she will also grant herself self-immolation as a debuff for 3 turns. It's a clock timer ability that basically every single turn at the end of the turn will deal 1,000 damage to her. So keep in mind, this is something where you go like, oh, you know, maybe with debuffs, maybe I can't die to this. No, this is actually going to kill off Liz if this is available. So using this third skill gives somebody a lot of buffs, reduces Liz down to 1 HP, and then puts a debuff on her that can get her killed. You need to be careful with how you use this. You need to plan accordingly. The thing is, this is also really interesting because you can use this as a means to kill herself off and rotate the party. So she is a Merlin that can actually like forcibly plug suit herself out without having to use plug suit, which opens up a ton of options. That's really, really solid as a buffing unit. But then also you can prevent her potentially from killing herself here, depending on how you want to act. So again, if we look at this, she gets basically she gets set down to 1 HP and she's going to put 1,000 damage on herself every turn. One of the ways we can deal with this is simply to heal her. If you were using the actual like Neo plug suit with her, remember it doesn't have Gander on it, instead has a heal. That heal, at least at like rank 6 or higher, would be enough to get you at least to the 3rd turn to fire off her NP a 3rd time. So there is some benefit to this. And again, you could definitely go higher. You could have it at rank 10 or something like that, and then she wouldn't even die at the end of 3 turns, assuming nobody gets to hit her. That's the other consideration, is if you actually leave something alive and it hits Liz, she might just die, so be very, very careful. Another consideration that will work really well is Habitrot. Habitrot obviously can grant her guts and potentially give her the region buff to offset the actual damage being done to Liz of the End here. So the order of operations will go that your turn will end, you will get 1,000 healing or more, depending on what you have the skill level to, and then after that, you will take a 1000 damage tick. So the healing will occur from Khadroth's third skill beforehand. This would also allow Khadroth to sacrifice herself and remove herself from the equation if you wanted to. So again, really nice effect here for potentially being able to forestall and keep, you know, Halloween Liz alive, probably doing all of this on turn 1. But there's also another side to Khadroth that's really interesting, and that's that her first skill is, again, a targetable heal of up to 2000, but it also grants debuff immunity. And what the debuff immunity can do is it actually can stop the entire immolation debuff from occurring. And I actually have a picture here to kind of show you guys this, but you guys can see if you put the debuff immunity on, Liz having her third skill depressed has no immolation debuff, but it will not block the reduction to her health. That is not considered a debuff per se. It is just an effect that happens. Her health is just getting set to that amount, regardless of whatever you have. So again, another interesting thing here, and maybe something to consider if you really like Liz and are considering like grailing this Liz or something like that. The way this kit works, maybe not the best gameplay consideration to do something like that, because it will just automatically set you to 1 no matter what you were at. But it is another interesting aspect to this that you can potentially just stop the immolation buff if you're worried about it, depending on who you use. So cleansing can also work potentially if you have some sort of command code that can get rid of it, or another unit in their kit where they're a noble Phantasm that can do it. So that is definitely something to consider for a way that you can prevent this sort of effect from going on. Now, again, this does afford Liz a lot of options. She can either work as your devoted damage dealer or be a just sort of buffing unit in the party that auto rotates. So that's really, really strong. That's why I say, like, this is a unit a lot of you guys are going to want to pay attention to, because this has a whole lot of value for anyone's Chaldea, regardless of what other units you may already have. You may already have, you know, Coin Sky of Dark or Merlin or somebody like that that kind of does a lot of the similar stuff to her, but they don't kill themselves at the end of it unless you do some extra special stuff to make that happen. Liz is going to do it pretty much automatically from her kit, and that's definitely something that can be very valuable. Taking a look at her passive skills here, she gets Oblivion Correction EX for additional crit damage of 12% added, Self-Replenishment Magic A for 3.8% NP gauge per turn, and that's pretty much it. For her pen skills, for her, personally, I would tell you guys to go with the mana loading skill. This one's going to be pretty strong, especially if you're trying to actually make her 3-turn, because again, 20% starting charge combined with Liz's own self 30%, that right there is going to get the ball rolling from a 50% standpoint. So to me, mana loading is the clear winner in that regard, but there's definitely maybe some usages for skill reloading, or maybe even extra attack finesse, or the special attack finesse for her to have a little bit more capability. To me, the anti-lancer attack damage aptitude, probably one of the worst things you can go after, but it is what it is. As we get to her noble Phantasm, you guys can see it is AoE Buster, as I mentioned before. It's 6 hits, it deals damage to all enemies, and it removes their offensive buffs, which is definitely another strong effect, because it means you're not going to have to worry about somebody like invuln piercing or anything like that on you if you have this in play. It's also going to inflict curse and burn to the target for 3 turns after the damage goes out. That's a little bit more on the unfortunate side, but it does mean if you followed up with subsequent NP, anything that allows her to sort of exploit additional power modifiers against targets that have curse or burn can be in play there. So definitely something to pay attention to when we start talking craft essences there, though again, honestly, I'm going to say anything that's a good 50% C is going to be really solid with Liz in this regard. Her overcharge effect increases her own Buster performance for 3 turns, activating first. It's only a base of 10%, but again, it does scale up. I'm just going to say at the end of the day, the fact that it's a 3-turn stacking buff does lend itself to making Liz 3-turn, even though this kit doesn't seem to want her to. And we've given you guys the means by which you can circumvent the annoying debuff on the 3rd skill if you so choose. So again, I do think this is a really, really interesting unit that they've designed here. Probably the one thing that she's missing that Merlin has is a lot of Merlin's effects come off the back end of his MP. A lot of hers are tied to her skills. but also she doesn't really have the party-wide protection aspect that Merlin has. So she's still not going to be Merlin or a Merlin replacement, but if you're just looking for somebody to buff the party and remove themselves, she's going to be excellent at that. Let's go ahead and let's talk about those 3-turn scenarios and how I feel like you guys should go about doing them. So on screen, you guys can see we have 2 potential scenarios. One is going to be using a singular Koyanskaya and double Oberon with the plug suit Mystic Code that has the heal. But you can see we actually do work in the heal here for after you've depressed Liz of the End's 3rd skill, because that's the timing there is going to matter so that you don't get her killed. Otherwise, charge should easily work out here, as again, you end up having just enough when you consider the fact that she does get the 10% refund with that 1st skill being popped. So with that, you now actually have enough charge to make something like this work via brute force. In the 2nd scenario, we're going to be instead utilizing a Habitrot here. And in similar deal, you're going to want to pop Liz's 3rd skill and then use Habitrot's 3rd skill. But it really doesn't matter in that case. But you can, remember, get away with the 1st skill being used as well. And this is all predicated on the idea that you would maybe not want Liz to off herself. Definitely is an option for you, though. And this would be utilizing double Koyanskaya and Oberon with still the, plug suit because it's strong. But again, definitely a nice aspect there. Taking a look at Liz's self-buff damage numbers only. This does not include external buffs from other supports. This does not include anything like craft essences or mystic codes. Just neutral damage, Liz under her own power with her skills maxed. And as you guys can see, numbers here kind of pedestrian, nothing really too much to write home about. She doesn't have a niche, she doesn't have a whole lot of firepower and high octane in her damage output, but it's not bad either. It's just kind of expected. And remember, with her being a welfare, you're going to get that 5th copy there regardless, so it is what it is. I'm going to say you're going to be looking at, again, that 40k range minimum most of the time. Taking a look at the actual damage compositions here, you guys can see this is still neutral damage, but this now does include things like supports and mystic codes and craft essences. So here we've got a level 100 cranking on her, double Koyanskaya and Oberon, but we're going to start out with Habitrot in the front end and to give her that regen buff and remove herself, and basically then do the Koyanskaya buffs as needed. You guys can see there, wave 1, we're looking at about 73k, wave 2, 93k, and wave 3, we get that huge Oberon spike there, all the way up to 347k. So the first 2 waves, maybe a little bit concerning, but nothing too bad. Also, if you include Koyanskaya's man attributes here into the mix and the niche that she can provide, these numbers do get a whole lot better. But if we start looking at things from the perspective of the double Oberon with a single Koyanskaya of light for cranking, a little bit, numbers are reduced, but we actually get higher damage in wave 2 due to the uniqueness of the situation. So again, both of these are pretty viable. It really just depends on what you have and what you want to run, but it does mean that she actually does have options if you do want a 3-turn with her. How would she compare against some of her other units that, would be competition to her? Ranmaru is another welfare AoE Avenger as an arts looper, and Ranmaru definitely can struggle a little bit on the refund side of things and having enough to cleanly loop. You guys can see double Castoria Oberon, level 100 Black Grail, still possible for her. And honestly, the damage numbers are pretty comparable. The standout here would be that wave 1 and wave 2 are a little bit more shored up and better off. Taking a look at Gorgon here would be another option. She is a 4-star, though admittedly story-locked option for people. She's gotten better due to her buffs. She can now actually 3-turn from a 50% starting charge standpoint, thanks to those buffs. And you guys can see, definitely not going to be that competitive at NP1 unless you've got like the stun and stuff in play. But we do have the capacity to kind of combine all of that for even more firepower. And then the second you get up to like NP2 and NP3, you're looking way more competitive with somebody like Liz at the end. So it really just depends what you're trying to do in that regard. Nobu Avenger was another one that I asked Avalon here for because I felt like to some degree, with a welfare, it's good to have a 5-star to compare against, since again, you get MP5 of the welfares. Comparing against some of the 4-stars may not be as fair. So taking a look at Nobu Avenger here, her best composition is going to be with Cranking, Double Coin Sky, and Oberon. And you guys can see she has a lot of niches. She has Divine, Sky, and technically from Koyan, Man, if she really had to. So you can't combine both Sky and Man because nothing will be both. But you can say Divine and Sky or Divine and Man there. But you guys can see just at NP1 even, without niches, you actually have a better play there for Liz. But the second you start getting into any of the niches, immediately Nobu Avenger is just better. And that is definitely something to pay attention to, that the second you get NP2, even raw numbers, she's going to be better. So it is another interesting aspect to this, is that kind of the age-old truism of NP1 of a 5-star can be outclassed by welfare, but NP2 just immediately kind of wins in a lot of cases. We still see that even to this day. Another comparison here would be Space Ishtar. Kind of been a long time coming from her. And keep in mind, we do have potential failure in some of this stuff, so that's why we have NP1 raw and then NP1 with the Buster Up being procced here. It's a Double Coin Sky, Oberon, and a Cranking Mysticode here for kind of the best results. But you can see, honestly, she's pretty competitive still, but definitely a little bit of an edge there at NP1 to someone like Liz. If we start looking at NP2, the numbers start looking a lot more even, possibly even in her favor if you have the Buster Up. Taking a look, we do have also Space Ishtar here at an arts form of it. This one's a little bit more synergistic for her, a little bit easier to use. And you guys can see pretty much a lot more competitive there with the arts up at NP1. But the second you go to NP2, she kind of is just going to win regardless of whether or not she gets the arts up. So to me, I think Liz is another really interesting unit that they've added to the game. I think she's going to be useful for everyone's account due to that ability to sacrifice herself and still get those buffs out. Let me know what you guys think about her. How do you guys feel about the newest welfare to the game? Are the devs kind of off their rocker for adding a pseudo Merlin to the welfare roster? Or is this just actually like a genius move of them to get people through the story? I don't know. I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next one. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Definitely helps me and the channel out, and I will see you guys for the next one. No need to esports her either, because you can get her to rotate at any point. Yeah, I think like a little bit I've always found the esports like side of things to be dumb. I actually kind of don't like it, but I understand why people do it. I think like there's nothing wrong with that per se.